Welcome.
Thank you.
Nice to have you joining us. So let me introduce myself. Sorry, I should have started with that. My name is Aaron Oxley. I'm the Executive Director here at Results UK. I'm really happy to be on the call with you all tonight. I mean, I always am, but I'm especially happy tonight. I'm on a real high. Basically because of a recent announcement by the UK government about its support for the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB and malaria. Many of the people on this call will have heard about the pledge that was made over the weekend. That's going to save 2 million lives. Now, last month on the conference call, I said these words. I said, back in 2016, you, the people on this call, helped persuade a new, relatively hostile Secretary of State, Priti Patel, to make a big pledge to the Global Fund as an effective use of aid money, saving a life every 2 minutes. A relatively small number of people can take credit for that achievement, and there's every reason to suppose we can persuade this Secretary of State to do the right thing this time around. Well, guess what? You've just done it. In so many ways, this is just mind-boggling amazing. So let's just pause and think about this for a minute and let it sink in. That's 2 million people who are going to now live instead of dying. Many of them dying in agony from preventable causes. 2 million people who are going to have the chance to lead a fulfilling life. But it's not just these 2 million people. It's millions more that might not necessarily have died, but whose chronic, debilitating, painful illnesses are cured, or that they never developed them in the first place, with all the positive knock-on effects that have for these people, their families, their communities, and their countries. That is just an incredible thing that our UK government has done on behalf of the people of the UK, and it's something we should all be truly proud of. And for everybody on the call tonight, it's something that you personally can be very proud of too. Somebody, and I won't say who, jokingly sent me an email saying that it was their letter to Rory Stewart that must have tipped the balance. And we laugh, but it's not really a joke, because how these decisions are made is sometimes not all that transparent. But for those of us that are a little bit closer on the inside, we see a little bit more clearly, and we know what makes a difference. It's having decision makers understand that there are people from all over the UK and all walks of life who are watching what they decide and for whom that decision matters. And you get that awareness from them from sustained campaigning, exactly the kind that all of you have done over the months and the years. Some of you who've campaigned for money for global health for several global health initiatives over the years, this might just seem like just one more thing that we've influenced just a little bit, but that would massively underestimate our impact. If you're new to Results, this is actually a great illustration of the kind of thing that we can achieve together, working with our allies across the sector, coordinating our advocacy so that what we do genuinely helps DFID officials and government ministers feel able to make this kind of announcement. And to be completely clear, not that many people have been campaigning specifically on the Global Fund replenishment, particularly because it was so early. And you can be so very sure that your pressure has contributed materially to the substantial victory and to the saving of those 2 million lives. I really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you've done and for all of the very specific advocacy activity that you've undertaken on behalf of Results, and never doubt that it all helps. With all the hard work done over the years, creating the right conditions and the right environment for a big pledge like this to come out and go and change the world. Now, in a minute, I'm going to introduce what our next goal is, which is the subject of tonight's call. But before I do, I'd like to just give a little bit more technical detail about the UK announcement. If you read an email from me on Saturday morning, you'll know that at 7 AM UK time, speaking at the G20 Leaders Summit in Osaka, Japan, the Prime Minister herself announced the UK's renewed commitment to the Global Fund of up to £1.4 billion, that's billion with a B, over a 3-year period. With this pledge, the UK, along with other leading donors such as Japan, has really helped to build momentum to ensure that the Global Fund is fully funded and able to help save 16 million lives in total by the year 2023. Those are new. They've already got 27 million in the bank, remember. You can read some more detail about that on our press release, and we're going to paste the link to that press release in the chat box. Now, you may remember, if you were campaigning on this, that our ask was for at least £1.4 billion. But this figure, the fact that we got to 1.4 billion but not higher, is by no means a disappointment. Let's be realistic for just a minute. In the current political climate, a pessimistic analyst could have easily concluded that the UK would struggle to do any more than match its previous 2016 level support of 1.2 billion. Reaching 1.4 billion was always a bold and ambitious stretch goal, and meeting it would have been a real demonstration of the UK's genuine commitment to be a leader on global health. And we did. If you're paying close attention, you'll see that the UK's announcement includes both a performance component of £100 million and a matching fund component of £200 million. While achieving both of these will mean that the fund's got to work both hard and smart over the next 3 years, we're very confident these components will be dispersed in full. And so we're really happy to be able to celebrate the full headline figure of 1.4 billion and 2 million lives. I've already been contacted by colleagues from other countries, specifically France, Germany, USA, Canada, and Australia, all big donors to the fund, all saying that this bold pledge from the UK is absolutely ratcheting up the pressure on their own governments to do more and giving them more advocacy ammunition in those conversations. Don't let anyone try and tell you the UK is going it alone with this pledge. The UK is leading in the true sense of the word. Well, which is why making the commitment at the G20 meeting was so symbolically important. Now, in Osaka, where Theresa May made her announcement, world leaders also committed to taking on a number of key health matters that Results works on, including the Global Fund, but antimicrobial resistance, universal health coverage, and nutrition. That's really important. We've been working hard collectively with a lot of allies all around the world, not just in the UK. You can't get something in the G20 communique from just one country. You've got to have pressure from all over the world. But we got that in there, and we're going to put the link to the G20 Leaders Declaration into the chat box so you can take a look at that for yourself as well. Really big week, lots of big wins. But we're having paused for a minute to celebrate. We're going to move on from here to the next win that we need on global health, which is polio eradication. And there's really no time to waste on that. As many of you know, we're over 99% of the way to beating the disease. But until there are no more cases left, the virus could still come back. So funding needs to be in place for at least the next 3 years to ensure that all children receive vaccination against this paralyzing illness.
Aaron?
Yeah, Pete.
Sorry, before you move on to the polio, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really want to thank you and the staff for supporting me and us in getting the result at the G20. You've done a fantastic job, and I think, you don't get enough acknowledgement. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. I appreciate it. Not all the staff are on this call, particularly not the ones that worked on the Global Fund, but I'll make sure that this gets shared with them. It's really nice of you to say that. You lend a lot of power to our arm, though, my friend. You really do. Let's do polio. I'm excited about polio. I've literally just actually come from Parliament where polio is being discussed. So, I don't want us to forget the lessons of the brick by brick report and realize that, Global Fund, polio, Gavi, nutrition for growth are all part of this, a much bigger picture. So, take strength and courage from the Global Fund and continue to build on it with polio. The reason why I'm so excited is that the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, or GPEI, we sometimes call it, has formally announced its replenishment target. They need $3.27 billion US. And earlier today, it met with our Department for International Development to suggest the amount that the UK government should contribute. So far, this hasn't been made public, but we're going to let you on this call be the first to hear that we at Results are going to be asking the government for £400 million in new contributions over this new strategy period that ends in 2023. Now, it's the same amount of money as over the previous strategic period. Now, we didn't put that figure in the action materials that you've got in your inboxes. The reason why we didn't put that figure in there is that we couldn't go public with that last week until the GPI themselves had a chance to speak to differ directly about the investment case and the needs that they had. So this is a hot off the press figure, and we're going to update the action materials online so that those will be, the 400 million pound figure will be in there for you going forward. But like I said earlier, As our new brick by brick report makes quite clear, we really can't succeed in achieving universal health coverage unless all the building blocks of a sustainable health system are in place. That includes things in place to treat infectious diseases such as AIDS, TB, and malaria, that vaccinations are available to protect children from easily preventable conditions, that adequate nutrition allows children to thrive and indeed to benefit properly from all of these other health interventions that we're investing in. So it's really vital that UK leadership on global health extends to all of these areas holistically. The really impressive support for the Global Fund really bodes well for the seriousness with which we expect the UK to take its role in supporting the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. And we hope and trust it'll also bring that same support next year for Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, where the replenishment conference will happen right here in the UK. But as always, we can't assume that this support will be given automatically. And we're really clear that DFID officials and ministers need to hear that there's public support for these important health investments instead of spending on other priorities that don't have the same kind of impact. This is particularly so at a time of great political turbulence, where priorities can very easily shift away from global health. But I've been talking non-stop for quite a long time. I'm going to pause right here. That's all I'm going to say just now. But really, just again, to come back to a big thank you for everything that you've achieved. Before we meet tonight's speaker, I'm going to hand over to Della to give the usual roundup of your advocacy over the last month. Over to you, Della.
Thanks, Aaron. I just wanted to say thanks to all of you who've written to Rory Stewart and been part of the successful campaign for global fund replenishment. I've been reading some fantastic letters and I've enjoyed reading all of them. So thanks for letting me know about all of those. Lots of you sent your letters out really soon after the last call as well. So thanks for making time in your busy schedules for that. We had letters from Stork Valley, Macclesfield, Poole, Birmingham and Norwich. Sorry if I've missed anyone. If you wrote a letter and you didn't let me know, you can still let me know. Although we've had the pledge, I'd still, still like to hear about these things. So, and I just wanted to alert you to a blog that Yannicka, our parliamentary advocacy officer on TB, has written in sort of a reaction to the announcement. I'll share that in the chat box with you shortly. Elsewhere in the network, Kathy from Edinburgh received a response on May's action from Richard Montgomery, the UK Executive Director to the World Bank, regarding the action you all did on nutrition. And he basically said that he agreed that many of the SDGs are off track for 2030, including nutrition, both in low and middle income countries. And he stated that the UK delegation are working really hard to keep the focus on nutrition under the wider Human Capital Index. So that was really positive. Just a short quote from that letter. He said, "I can assure you we will continue to provide strong leadership to ensure that global momentum on nutrition is maintained and that we will continue to work to deliver on scaling up nutrition." If you've had any other responses from him, let me know as usual. Elsewhere in the network, some sad news. We're sad to see Ruth from Edinburgh step down as the group leader, and just wish her all the best of luck with her post-graduation plans. She's not on the call, but I thought I'd let everybody else know if you haven't caught up with her. Elsewhere in Scotland, welcome to Archie, who you may have met during the national conference. He's met with the Linglithgow group recently, but is hoping to start a new group in Glasgow where he's based. So best of luck. Also, recently the Stork Valley group had an open evening, and I've been told you had an enthusiastic new person, which sounds really positive. And Corinne has also been super busy because she went to speak at a university careers event earlier in the month. So if anyone wants to share anything that I've touched on, Corinne, maybe want to say something about the careers event if you're on the call, or if anyone has any other comments on the last month, now's the time.
Hi, it's Pete here, Stork Valley.
Hi.
I also got a reply from the Executive Director of the World Bank, and it seemed to me that it was kind of personal, which I really thought was great. I did forward it to the office and I got a reply, so it's got lost in the graffiti.
Oh, maybe one of us has seen it that isn't me, and that's why I forgot to mention. But But thanks for letting me know. I will dig it out and have a read.
Yeah, Corinne doesn't seem to be here.
Okay, fair enough.
I would guess her contact isn't here either, but I don't know. I see two numbers, so I don't know who they are.
Thanks, Peter. That's quite timely because we're actually going to be meeting with the UK Executive Director's Office in just a couple of weeks' time when we're in DC. So we'll make sure we dig that out. Really helpful.
Okay.
That was going to be all from me, unless anybody else wanted to comment on what they've been up to. If I've missed anything, then I'll hand back over to you, Aaron.
All right, let me get off mute. So, right, onto the topic of tonight's call, which, as I've said, is the very important topic of polio eradication, something that many of you on the call have been taking action on for a number of years now. We last asked you to take action on polio specifically, apart from all the other advocacy on vaccination more generally, right back in January of 2017. Which helped contribute to the UK government's announcement in August later that year of an additional £100 million top-up, adding to their existing £300 million commitment to polio eradication for the previous strategic period. So this month, where I hope we're going to discuss how things have moved on since then and what needs to happen now to continue the path towards the eradication of polio. It's really my great pleasure to introduce Chelsea Minkler. She's a program officer at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, specializing in polio and advocacy for polio eradication. I know you've been on the call since the beginning, Chelsea. Do you want to say hi?
Thanks a lot, Aaron.
Welcome very much to the call. Let me finish introducing you. Chelsea has worked at the Foundation for the past 8 years on polio, vaccine delivery and child health. And prior to joining, she had roles at Lake Partner Strategy Consultants, the Washington State Department of Community Trade and Economic Development, and the United States Mission to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Chelsea, I know that the Gates Foundation is a big supporter of the eradication of polio, and it must be really exciting to be sitting in your seat as we get ever closer to the end of this disease. I'm really, really pleased you're able to join us tonight, and a big welcome. Thank you for taking time out of your working day. It's in the middle of the day in Seattle, but I really, really appreciate you joining us. You've heard a bit of who you've got on the call this evening already, and you can see them, you've heard them. We're joined by volunteer advocates from all over the UK, from Scotland to the South Coast. They've got a passion for taking action to overcome global poverty. And of course, they're all really looking really forward to what you have to say about the remaining challenges we face in the incredible story of the as yet near eradication of polio from our world. Tonight we're going to start with as we always do, with 3 pre-arranged questions for you to get you rolling, and then we're going to open that up to questions from the floor. For those of you that are on your computers, feel free to ask us a question or make comments in the chat function on the side of the screen. For those of you that are just on your phones, you can text in if you'd prefer to do that. As always, the number to text in tonight is the same as it was last month. It's 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178, and of course we'll also go the unmute yourself and yell in a question at some stage as well. But Chelsea, before we get on to the questions, I really always like to start by asking our guest speaker to say a little bit about themselves. So I've already introduced you, but that's in many ways the boring part. We'd love to hear something about you personally. What is it that makes you such a passionate advocate for polio eradication, and how did you come to get involved in this work?
Great, well, thanks a lot, Aaron. And just also wanted to echo the great thanks for your team and the support they do at the staff level. I know that we had a big celebration here for the Global Fund. The Gates Foundation is also a big advocate of that fund as well, and global health more broadly. And we talk often about how just essential that the UK results team, as well as all the grassroots volunteers, are across all of these strategies. So a huge congratulations to the team, and a big thank you for that, and also the historical work on polio. I mean, I think that polio is deeply personal to me. I'm incredibly passionate about it, clearly. A lot of that stems from my time in the field. So when I first started at the Gates Foundation, I was less on the advocacy and government engagement side, and more on the field delivery side. So worked on polio eradication, both in the field in Bihar, India, and also Francophone Africa. So most of my experience is actually in Chad. And we just have these heroic volunteers that are working for the program, most of them women in the community that just have made it their personal passion to make sure that every child in the world is protected from polio and this disease is eliminated, and just the lengths that a lot of these people go in their communities to reach hard to reach children was just really inspiring. And so from my distant corner in Seattle, just to be able to do anything that I can do to support them, I think really drives. Also, I think that what's so exciting about polio is it's measurable, it's a clear end goal, and as someone who really cares about global development and global health, it's really easy to see that this could be the win that could propel global health back into the mainstream, in the main stage. That these are really achievable things that we can do. Smallpox was an amazing accomplishment for humanity, and I think in kind of the US context, we talk about this a lot as our next moonshot that hopefully can help drive other global initiatives forward as well.
Thanks, Chelsea. It's always great to hear a little bit of your own personal story in your own words. And thanks a lot for sharing why it's so important to you. We all have our own motivations for wanting to get involved in this work. And often it's really useful to reflect on what those motivations are, and it helps rebuild our resolve to take action. So thanks for helping us do that. One thing that a couple of people have flagged is that for them, the audio is a little muddy coming from your end. I can hear you quite well, but it's not just me that needs to hear you. So I don't know if it's possible. I see you coming close to the mic. So let's
be close to my microphone.
Great. Yeah, that'd be really great. So let's jump over pre-prepared questions, and I'll remind folks to introduce yourself before asking Chelsea a question. But the first question tonight comes from Glasgow. Hopefully.
I'm not sure she's on the call.
I'm not sure if Archie's on the call or not, but I am happy to ask the question if he doesn't pipe up, because I have it here.
Well, why don't you go ahead, Della?
Okay, sure. So the question is, sorry. Sorry, it wasn't quite as close to hand as I thought it was. Right, here we go. So question one, we're told that the GPI has done 99.99% of the job in eradicating polio. So why is over $3 billion still needed to tackle the last handful of cases each year?
I mean, I think that's a great question, and we actually get it a lot. If you only had 33 cases in 2018, that's a lot of money for 33 cases. And I think that the top line is that it's actually not 33 cases. That's the money that we spent to prevent 200,000 cases that would happen if we didn't have this initiative every year. So just to make sure that we're clear on kind of what that return on investment. And so what does that money actually go for? Well, there's actually quite a bit of things. So first we need to know where all the cases are and what communities are most at risk in order to protect them. And so there's a massive lab network that this money funds to make sure that we seek out all of the cases. And we do this in two ways. First, if you have a mother or father who has a paralyzed child, even in the most war-torn, difficult areas, right now the only places we have wild polio left are Pakistan and Afghanistan, they still usually find someone to tell. And so when that happens, we would test the sewage on the children. It's almost always under 5-year-old children. Send it to a lab, find out if they have polio. We also do a lot of testing in sewage. Polio is transmitted for the fecal route, and so if there's places that we suspect that there could be polio, we can test widely there. And so once we have a good sense of where they are at risk, and there's a lot of places that we don't have active cases of polio that are clearly at risk for polio, because if there's one case anywhere, we really are at risk everywhere, including the UK and the United States, where I'm calling from. We need to make sure that every single child is vaccinated. Now, this can be very tricky. You know, as you can imagine, A lot of the areas of Afghanistan, very unstable. Historically, polio has found the most difficult places on earth. India was the last place declared polio-free, and we are 2 months away from having 3 years polio-free Africa, with the last case in Nigeria, which is something that we're really hoping to celebrate soon. So to make sure that every single child is reached when you have nomadic populations, mobile populations, often in these war-torn areas, is quite an endeavor. So in the UK, most children would be vaccinated by going to the clinic and receiving vaccine in the regular routine immunization system, which is what organizations like Gavi would fund. For the areas where polio, we can't rely just on that system. So we actually have to send vaccinators door to door, house to house. Once again, these are the women in the community that I mentioned earlier that I find so inspiring to deliver vaccine, often sometimes as frequently as once a month in the areas where we have active circulation. So this money is procuring that vaccine, paying these workers. And then I think not unsurprisingly, there is also a decent amount of work that needs to be done in the community to make sure that people are welcoming of these vaccinators and the vaccine. I'm a parent myself. I'm not sure if many of you are, but if I had someone knocking on my door saying, I want to vaccinate your child, I've got it right here, bring him here, I would be pretty skeptical. So there's a lot of social mobilization of people going to the community, us working with traditional religious leaders, other leaders in the community, women in the community, before these campaigns happen where vaccinators are going door to door to make sure that the community is prepared and accepting of this. So when you look across all of our risk geographies and the number of children that need to be vaccinated on a regular basis, that's where we end up spending most of those funds.
Thank you, Chelsea.
Really struggling to find my mute button tonight. Yeah, that's a great answer. I mean, I think that the understanding of what we're really buying with all that money and what happens when we stop, if we were to fail to finish the job, is really key. I know we have Stort Valley on the call, so that's where we're going for question 2.
Unmute, thank you. All right, question 2. In what ways can the GPI work in more coordinated ways with other health institutions to improve their combined effectiveness?
It's also another good and tricky question. I know top of mind to a lot of governments right now who are wondering how this all fits together. So I think there's a couple of ways, and we've actually had massive improvements just even in the last couple of years. Something that makes GPI a little bit different than some of the other funds that you might advocate for is there were actually a partnership of 5 organizations. There's actually no entity that is GPI. So that includes UNICEF, the World Health Organization, Rotary International, the US Center for Disease Control, and the Gates Foundation. So in addition to being a Gates Foundation staff, I'm also a GPI staff. And since particularly we're working with UNICEF and WHO, they already have very strong links across a lot of other global health initiatives for things like routine immunization that they're already working with, which is great. I think what also makes GPI really unique is it's really the only organization in the world that has the ability to reach every single child. I think there's a lot of areas with deep instability, like say South Sudan, where the WHO funded GPI worker is a lot of the time the only interaction children would have with the health systems. And so we really take full advantage of that. The polio program's actually partnered and delivered over 2 billion doses of vitamin A. When I was working in Chad, which was one of the few places on earth left with guinea worm, the polio vaccinators going door to door would also carry pictures of guinea worm and ask people, have you seen this in anywhere in your community? And so it's something that we actually have a strong history of partnering with other programs to make sure that these kids have more services than just polio vaccine. But also in Nigeria, one of the big champions was that our WHO staff there were actually critical when we had the Ebola outbreaks in 2014, it being repurposed to help partner with the Ebola response, and were one of the reasons that we had interruptions so quickly there. One of the things that we've actually been doing just even in the last year is that Gavi has actually been brought on as a 6th formal governing partner. There's actually 2 polio vaccines, which I'm happy to get into sort of the science behind how we use different vaccines in the program. And one of them is an injectable that we use through the routine immunization system, so that clinic-based system that I mentioned before. And it wasn't used actually in a lot of these countries. And so Gavi actually led the rollout of the largest vaccine introduction in history by rolling out this one polio vaccine across all of these at-risk countries in the world. So we now have that vaccine introduced in all 192 countries recognized by the World Health Organization, and have brought them in. So we, of course, ideally wouldn't be delivering all of these vaccines door to door. We'd have strong systems supported by the WHO, supported by Gavi, supported by UNICEF, and are really looking to partner across all of these to make sure that we're offering an integrated approach. And once, hopefully, knock on wood, when polio is eradicated, we will, be able to transition all of these health workers with deep, deep knowledge of child health and systems to help support the broader routine immunization system, which we've already seen in India happen after they interrupted transmission.
Great. So a really good answer to quite a complex, potentially complex question, Chelsea.
Thank you, Chelsea.
There's a reason we preload a couple of these. But let's go to our third preloaded question from Poole down on the South Coast.
Hello, Chelsea. I'm Helen from the Poole Group.
Hi.
Hello. How important is it that the UK strongly supports the work of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative?
So I would say that the UK, and maybe don't tell the other donors I said that may be the most important donor that we have. It's the second largest country donor to GPI. It covers about 10% of the budget. And it's the largest donor beyond the core partner donors. So that would be the US and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In addition to that, the UK government not only gives money, but they also give a lot of technical expertise. So when the GPI has strategy meetings in order to set the direction of the program, the UK actually has a seat and represents all of the other donors. And so since they are offering that kind of technical expertise and capacity as one of the major donors, a lot of the other donors are looking to the UK for direction in how they feel about the program, how confident they are, and whether or not they think that this is a good investment. So I think much like the Global Fund, this is something that other donors are actively looking to the UK for their leadership. I think also, like the Global Fund, the UK is not in this alone. Once again, it's 10% of the budget, not 90% of the budget. But traditionally, actually, they have covered a little bit less of its share than they have in some of the other funds like Gavi. And so I think that there's a real opportunity for leadership here that could be demonstrated if the UK were to come through with that 400-pound ask that Erin mentioned before.
Thanks, Chelsea. That's really great. We are going to throw the lines open for additional questions in the usual way. Again, that number 0777 56 11178. Those that are on Zoom on their computers, do feel free to open up the chat box and type in there. And then we are going to also do a unmute and shout out bit a little later on. We've got plenty of time to discuss, which is really, really good. Let's go to the chat box first, because I think a few people have seen those questions. They've been sitting there for a while. Why don't we go to the Poole Group? Wow, there's loads coming on the chat box. This is great. Why don't we actually, let's take them in order. Let's go back to Peter's question. It seems that there's a lot of focus on prevention, even though there's few actual cases. This suggests a high risk of a potential epidemic. Do we have examples of how swiftly polio spreads without being controlled?
So I think that's tricky, and it depends on how good you have overall routine immunization in a community. So, I think it's just how well it's controlled. If we had no immunization, I think it can spread very rapidly. We've seen in areas where we haven't had access because of, for example, war, there'd be a lot of cases pop up very rapidly. So the number that we see is 200,000. If we were to just stop tomorrow, that's the number of cases that we'd see worldwide creep up to. Before we were doing sort of any mass control in 1988, when the Polio Eradication Initiative started, we're seeing closer to around 350,000 cases a year. But it does not take long for population immunity to wane. Really, sometimes in these high-risk areas, just a couple of months before we start to see cases pop back up.
Yeah, it's, I mean, amongst my understanding of polio is that amongst the, if you rank the virulence of a disease in terms of how easily it spreads, some diseases spread quite slowly, like say tuberculosis that a lot of the people on this call are familiar on. I mean, comparatively slowly. Some spread quite rapidly, like measles. My understanding is that polio is much closer to measles than it is to tuberculosis in terms of how quickly and easily it's transmitted between people.
Yes, especially in since this is waterborne fecal oral. A lot of these are places with poor sanitation, and that can also lead to rapid transmission.
Hashtag poop emoji. Yeah.
We do have a sense of humor about that in the program.
yeah, absolutely. So
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. A great question. Let's actually go on to the second question in the chat box as well, because I think that potentially flows on quite well. Could we hear more about the issue of vaccine-derived polio and its link to eradication? That's from Deirdre.
And that is the hardest question that we get asked, and the bane of my communications colleagues' existence. So vaccine-derived problems is a real risk to the program and something that we spend a lot of time worrying about. So as I mentioned, there's two different polio vaccines. One of them is the oral polio vaccine, we call it OPV, and that is cheap, it's inexpensive, it is easy to give door to door. You just do 2 drops out of a dropper into a child's mouth. And the beauty of this vaccine is that it really helps interrupt transmission and vaccinate a whole community. And so I'm going to get a little sciencey, and Aaron, definitely pull me back up if I need to be pulled back up.
Will do.
Is it gives you mucosal immunity, so it gives your gut immunity. So if you were to receive this vaccine and ingest polio, you're not going to poop it out. It stops in your stomach. Also, when you get that vaccine, you, in addition to having that protection, you'd also poop out a little bit of that vaccine, exposing this weakened strain to other members of your community who also get protection from that. And so this is the vaccine that actually interrupts transmission. There's another type of vaccine called the inactivated polio vaccine, IPV. It's easy to think of as IPV as injectable. And so this is the one that you would get as a shot. And this gives you systemic immunity. So it makes it so if you were to ingest polio, there's no way that you can get polio. But it doesn't stop the transmission of polio. So you could ingest polio and continue to poop it out. And so we've actually had situations like in Israel about a decade ago, where we were continuing to see polio in sewage because people were ingesting and passing it, but we weren't actually seeing any cases of polio because it's a heavily vaccinated community. And so if we want to eradicate, you need to use the drops. In very rare situations, the drops have a chance of, once they go into the community to offer this sort of mass immunization, if you have very, very low coverage of vaccination, in these slight cases, it can occasionally start to mutate and spread and become infectious like wild polio, which is a terrifying thought. And very counterintuitively, the best way to stop this is to give more of this oral polio vaccine, which doesn't seem like it should be the right thing it is. And so one of the reasons that the program has partnered with Gavi is because it turns out that the actual very best way to interrupt transmission and keep all children safe from this very rare side effect is to actually give all children a dose of this inactivated polio vaccine, the shot, through their regular clinics when they're a baby. And then that would give them systemic protection for when they receive the oral polio vaccine. And something that's actually even more amazing is that these two vaccines, it turns out, actually work together, where they both make each other work better. So if you got the shot, the immunological coverage that you get from getting the drop is actually higher than if you were just to get the drop alone, more so than if you just got them separately. So it's something that the program is working on. And we do occasionally see these vaccine-derived polioviruses pop up. And if you overlay a map of the world and what sort of our typical routine immunization coverage would be, all the places with low coverage, those are the places at most risk for this. And the polio program does respond to all of those outbreaks, just like wild polio virus, because we want to make sure that no kids are receiving that either. So it's a really tricky question, and let me know if my explanation was clear. But it's something that we're seeing more and more, and I think wasn't very noticeable when we were facing hundreds and thousands of cases a year of wild polio and, you know, maybe max 100 cases of vaccine derived. Now that we're down to 33 cases of wild, a comparable number of vaccine derived is much more concerning.
So the shorter version of that is we need to vaccinate more and more and more, and that will take care of that problem. That's the pathway to eradication.
Yes, and we would include also having all vaccine-derived poliovirus gone before we were fully eradicated.
Yeah, magic. Thank you. We will keep on going. I did share in the chat box also earlier while Chelsea was answering the third question, a link to the actual polio endgame strategy 2019 to 2023 for those of you that want to dig into the details around all of that. That's where we've got some of our figures from. That's where, you know, what we're looking at for the next, that is the strategic period we're talking about. So that's a great document to dig into. But because that partially answers the question coming in from Results Norwich. What is the main part to the GPEI new strategy? So Chelsea, can you help people having to avoid to read this document? Give us the highlights package. And is it worth contacting polio champions about writing to the minister?
I'd say I'll answer the second part first. Yes, absolutely. The more champions that we have, we need all the help we can get. So really anyone that you can reach out to. There's a number of parliamentarians who volunteered to be polio champions, who we really rely on to offer this high level support. So, I mean, the crux of the strategy is vaccinate, vaccinate, vaccinate. I think, Aaron, is what you were saying before. It does get more granular in terms of how we would do this, especially you know, looking at within these highest risk countries, what kind of pivots the program could do. So, for example, historically, we've treated Pakistan and Afghanistan quite separately. Of course, you know, there's a lot of politics between the two governments. Unfortunately, that's not really how people move and how people think on the ground. There's a lot of transmission between the borders of Pakistan and Afghanistan. So something that's really new in this strategy is to start to think of them as one epidemiological block and make sure that we are working with both of those governments really as one to address the program. Something else that I think that this strategy has done that's a little bit different in the past, in addition to just vaccinate, 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 is to also look at it through a couple of new lenses. So one is to look at through the lens of gender. We have so many female vaccinators and how they engage with their community and make sure that they're supported, and we're being conscientious of that. As well as back to Pete's earlier question about making sure that we're well integrated across systems, as well as with our other partners on the ground that are working on this. But I think most of the strategy, the crux is sort of what I outlined earlier with the first questions on surveillance. How do we find and identify social mobilization? How do we make sure that these communities are open to the vaccine? And then making sure that we have vaccine readily available and it's delivered in the field.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. I would suggest, you know, as well as Chelsea's summary, it is definitely worth going and looking at the actual strategy. The executive summary is surprisingly accessible, so do go take a look if you've got a minute. We are now going to go to the phones. If people want to take themselves off mute, they can yell out a question. Oh, I see Manchester leaning towards the screen. Is that because you're about to ask a question, Manchester? No, you're shaking your head? Okay. Does anybody else have a question?
Oh, Macclesfield's got a question.
Go ahead, Macclesfield. Make sure you introduce yourself, of course.
Do you want to ask it, Ricky? Or?
Okay, it's Ricky. How will we know when polio has been eradicated?
It's a good question. So for us to have full eradication and certification, we have to go 3 years with no cases, either in people or in those environmental samples. And that's been pretty much when we can be pretty clear that it's not there. I think what is great about polio is it's not something that lives in the environment for very long. So it's not something that we'd be worried in 10 years popping up out of the ice. It's actually a pretty weak virus outside the human body. So 3 years has been what all of our modelers tell us is the appropriate amount of time that we can be confident in that it's gone.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Chelsea, so when I was in Parliament earlier this evening, where somebody threw a slide up on the wall, and I found myself grabbing for a piece of wood because the slide said that Nigeria has been 34 months without a case. Do you want to tell us what we're going to do in 2 months' time?
Well, hopefully, and it probably be longer than 2 months. So if we get 2 more months with no more cases, we will declare both Nigeria and the African region of the World Health Organization as polio free. The reason I say it might take a little bit longer, just in case anyone's really into this and looking at the news, is it does sometimes take a little while for all the lab samples to be processed. And so we'll want to make sure that every kid who's had any sort of paralysis, and I want to be clear, all sorts of things cause paralysis beyond polio. So we check everybody just to make sure that we're really sure that any potential cases have been thoroughly examined. But I think that will be a victory for the world, and then it will be down to the Middle East.
So fingers crossed, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Holding our breath.
Yeah, holding our breath. Well, not for 2 whole months, you pass out. But yeah, definitely on tenterhooks for that one. Peter asked, if we reach 100% eradication, how would the disease vector survive? And I think you've kind of answered that already, Chelsea, in the sense that it kind of wouldn't. Is it right?
Yeah, and so there's GPI in addition, and this is also in the strategy if you want to dig into it, has a pretty comprehensive containment plan on making sure that even for if it's not circulating in the environment, that we don't once again have polio samples in a refrigerator somewhere. And we would continue to vaccinate just with the inactivated, the shot, for 10 years after certification, just as an extra insurance policy. To make sure that everybody's covered. And that's something that would go through Gavi, not through the GPI. GPI will be going away as an organization after the eradication of polio. So it's already something that we're working on to make sure that even the amount of polio in labs, who's manufacturing them in terms of pharmaceutical companies that make the vaccine, it's already becoming very restricted on who can have this on hand. I think that another question that we often get is, could people hold on to this for biological weapons? And something that actually is great about polio, not great, but it's actually not something that would be easily weaponized. It's not something, while it spreads rapidly, it's not something that gives a violent reaction always. And so it's not like a smallpox or an Ebola we really worry too much about that, but we do want to make sure that we're being responsible as a global community, that we know where every sample that could potentially have polio would be.
Thanks, Chelsea. Yeah, that's great. Do people have some other questions for Chelsea? Jill, I see your question in the chat. I'm not sure Chelsea can answer that one. We'll make sure you get you an answer. But do people have any other questions for Chelsea?
Oh, I've got loads.
Go ahead then, Peter. Ask another one. Nobody else has leapt forward.
Hi, Chelsea. I didn't introduce myself earlier. Suppose I'm the group leader for Stork Valley Results, and my question now is, having heard that the polio virus doesn't have much of a chance in the wild, what is it? How did it, is it entirely created by humanity itself, or where did it come from? Because if it's eradicated and it's gone, I can't quite get my head around it at the moment.
So no, it's a good point, and I think that it's actually one of the reasons that we can eradicate polio is that it's exclusive to humans. So I'm not sure how it initially mutated and what it came from. But it's something that's unique to our species. So when we look as a global community, if we decide that we want to have an eradication initiative, there's only certain types of diseases that can be eradicated. So for example, Ebola can live in bats, it can live in monkeys. There's no way that we can go and vaccinate every single bat and every single monkey in the world. What makes polio so appealing for an eradication initiative like this is that it only lives in humans and it can't survive outside humans for very long. So we have had for thousands of years, you can find Egyptian mummies that have polio in it, really a symbiotic relationship with this virus. That it really needs us to survive. And so I think that gives us hope that this is achievable.
Thank you.
And I've noticed that Jill's typed in a question to the chat box that I think we can throw to Chelsea. Has there been an increase in polio cases this year as compared to last, and why do you think this is?
So there has, which is something that we're deeply concerned about, and I'm hoping will actually, for some of the country programs, to make some changes. I think that there's two reasons. One, in Afghanistan, for the last several months, we've had a Taliban ban on all World Health Organization programs. So that's not by any means polio specific, but it's meant that we can't do any house-to-house campaigns in Taliban-controlled areas, Afghanistan, which is where we're seeing all of the cases. One of the strengths of the partnerships that I mentioned before, of there being 5 partners, is that it does give us some flexibility that we can have some access negotiations to try to unlock some of those areas. And the program has been successful in the past, and we have had bans opening up those areas. But once again, I think back to the question of how quickly do you start to see outbreaks, the answer being quite quickly. So we have an issue there. I think in Pakistan, where we're also seeing some increases in cases, and once again, this is not an explosion of cases, where I think the case count is at 37 this year, which is a lot. It'll be more by the end of the year. We're about to enter the high season. I think concerningly, we have had a change of administration, and we often see a slight increase once we have a new government come to power. So they're trying to get their hands around how to best manage this program. The Global Polio Eradication Initiative always partners with governments. These are government-owned programs that need to work through all levels of government to make sure that we have full commitment. And I know that at the Prime Minister level, he's been very clear that this is a source of national embarrassment. This is something that he takes very seriously. But I think that we're still trying to make sure that they're on the right track in terms of execution. I think also just want to be very clear, just in terms of epidemiology, there isn't a big difference in terms of 20 cases or 100 cases. I think there's a very big difference in terms of 20 cases or 1,000 cases. And something that we haven't got into, it's also in terms of how quickly polio spreads, is polio isn't like smallpox, where if you have smallpox, you immediately have very clear symptoms. But what's tricky about polio, but once again, why it's not easily weaponized, is only about 1 out of every 200 people who's exposed to polio actually is paralyzed. Other people just get sort of typical flu-like symptoms. So that makes it a lot harder to track, which is why we do all of this intensive surveillance looking at sewer systems. And so since there often is some of this silent transmission, that's why, based on kind of immunity in the population, there's not actually that big of a difference between case counts. And if you actually look at India right before eradicated, I think that we're a lot closer to where we're going to be this year than we were last year. I think a dispiriting trend, and I want to be fully transparent that it's something that we are worried about, but hoping that it's going to have some in-country changes in terms of how we organize ourselves, and hopefully we'll still get there. The strategy, which Aaron mentioned, which goes through 2023, is hoping that we will eradicate in 2020 with the last case then, and then we'll go the 3 years of continuing vaccination until we hit that global certification that the world is polio-free in 2020.
Thanks, Chelsea. Certainly in Parliament this evening, there was a gentleman from the polio program in Pakistan who was highlighting that there had been an increase in cases, and was talking to the very full room about some of the new commitments and approaches that they were planning to take there to shake things up and reverse that. So it's very front of mind of people. We have 4 minutes left. I'm going to go to Della's question in the chat, although I see Macclesfield wanting to swoop, I think. Do you want to ask your question, Macclesfield? Then we'll do the chat and we'll see if we can wrap it all up in just 4 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, do you want to ask it, Ricky, or?
Yeah,
Go on.
it's me again, I'm afraid, Chelsea. So I'm interested that you said that there are parts of the world where the Taliban in Afghanistan have this ban on Western-led health interventions. I'm wondering, because we seem to be assuming that a polio eradication program will be Western-led. Is that inevitable? Because you would think that in many parts of the world, there could be a local drive for eradicating polio.
Great. And sorry, Chelsea, before you answer, because I think that goes really well with Della's question. She asked, I've heard about attacks on polio health workers in Pakistan. Does the GPI have any role in preventing this kind of attack, or should the government step in? Is it simply a case of getting at the engaged skeptical communities? So I think they're quite related.
They are. So I think that it's actually, there's an interesting dichotomy within the polio program where the funding for the program primarily comes from the West. I in no way want to imply that a lot of the impacted countries also are funding, these are actually pretty high levels. So not all that funding would flow through the GPI partners, but they're all spending a lot of money on their own healthcare system. A lot of the workers are getting checks both from GPI and from the local government. Also, some of these impacted countries, for example, Pakistan, have taken out significant loans to help also cover the cost of their polio program. In the last period, Pakistan took out $160 million in loans to help cover their program. So they really are taking financial accountability. This isn't just a West-driven financial push, but I think the bulk of the funding does come from those Western donors like the UK and the Gates Foundation. In terms of government ownership, I think in all of these communities, this is very much considered a local government program, sometimes to our detriment. So part of I think the beauty of the program is, for example, when we have vaccine-derived poliovirus in Syria a couple of years ago, there were enough neutral parties that we could still go into these non-government controlled areas and vaccinate the populations. And actually, in a matter of months, we're able to interrupt transmission there, which for people here, Afghanistan, Pakistan, is this something we can even do? We interrupted in Syria. We recently interrupted a vaccine-derived poliovirus in Papua New Guinea in just a matter of months. So in some really tough, unstable political areas, we are successful. Della, to your question about vaccinator violence, this is something that we do struggle with as a program. Frankly, I also just wanted to offer the caveat, it's not something that we actually highlight too much in our public materials because often if they're given a lot of media and press time, that actually can make some of these vaccinators targets in their community. So when you are looking at things like the GPI website, if you want to dig further, that's the reason that we're not, I think, calling this out more. The vaccinator violence, there's a couple of different things going on. Some of it is that people get killed in war zones. So they aren't always targeted because they're vaccinators. Sometimes they're targeted because there are conspiracy theories about this being a program of the West. That these are non-halal vaccines, or this is a conspiracy against the West to sterilize Muslims. That's something that we have had to face, and we partner with local religious leaders to try to counteract a lot of them, and they've been really invaluable partners on the ground. But the primary reason, primarily in Pakistan, that some of these people are targeted is because this is considered a government-owned program. This is something that both our current prime minister in Pakistan and the former one were very vocal that they felt a lot of ownership about. And so when you had anti-government elements, when they would view the vaccinators, and in some of these more dangerous areas, we send police with the vaccinators as part of their protection. They're actually sometimes targeting the police, and the vaccinators get caught in the crossfires, but it's because it is viewed as so entwined with the current government. And so that's one way to target, particularly if you're looking at anti-government elements like Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Taliban.
Wow. So I think I'm really, really sorry that we are going to have to call the questions to an end there. I think, what I'm certainly taking from that last set of answers is that, when we're getting money from the UK government to support the end of polio, we're making sure that some of the bravest people in the world can do their jobs to eradicate this really deadly disease, and standing with them is certainly something that makes me want to get involved. Chelsea, I just want to finish by saying A massive thank you to you for taking time out of your undoubtedly incredibly busy day to share your perspective on all of this and the challenge that we have to eradicate polio from the planet forever. I want to say a big thank you to everybody for joining the call and for all that you are doing to influence the institutions and politicians who have the power to make decisions to support vital health investments like the Global Fund, like GPI, later next year, Gavi, the Nutrition for Growth Summit in Tokyo. I've really enjoyed this evening's call. I've learned a few new things about polio, always learning. I hope you have too. Really good luck with your letters this month, everyone. We're asking you to write to the new DFID Minister, Dr. Andrew Morrison, who's taken over the Global Health portfolio. He'll be brand new to polio. It's really vital that he hears about this work right now, right after hearing from the GPI about their financial request. We want him to realise that this is something that has loads of support and is just a sensible, really good thing to do. We do think, a little bit of insider intel here, we do think, just as the Global Fund pledge came early, the decision on that was made quite early, we think there's a pretty good chance that DFID will want to consider their response to this request, potentially even as soon as before the parliamentary recess, which will be later this month. We don't know the exact date of that yet, partly to do with UK politics. So as with last month, don't sleep on this. Act really, really quickly. Get it right in there. We want Andrew and Dr. Morrison to be like, polio? Wait, what? Look at all this polio. And then understand straight away how important this is to do get them in fast. So I want to finish with giving everybody a really, really big round of applause. Chelsea for joining us on the call, all of you for all of the work that you do. We had a really, really big win in the last week, and I realized when I got to the end of my spiel about thanking you all just so much, we didn't actually stop and have a bit of a clap. So 2 million lives saved, everybody. That's what I really want you to take away from the call tonight. But we can't rest yet. Let's go do polio as well. But thank you so much for Global Fund. Big clap. Have yourself a magical evening, and we will speak to you all again really, really soon. Take care. And cheers, Chelsea. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, I've never had a results round of applause before.